thanks for the invitation. My name is Noeleen Smyth and I work at the National Botanic Gardens in Dublin. And so thank you for the invite, and it's a great pleasure to be talking to you here today. So really the title of my talk is Debunking the Myths about Wildflowers and Wildflower Meadows. And I'm just showing you on my first slide here, half the species are native species and the other half are exotic species. And I suppose really just to highlight that one, they're both equally as beautiful as the other, and it can be sometimes it can be a bit of perception around what's pretty and what's not pretty, but I think definitely our wildflowers, our native ones, are pretty lovely. So hopefully I can keep going here. So what is a wildflower? And I suppose it's a concept that we all maybe think about. So we're all quite familiar with daffodils. And I suppose when we look to the Oxford English Dictionary, a wildflower is a flower of an uncultivated variety or flower growing freely without human intervention. So daffodils, it might be a surprise to us, grow freely in Western Europe and Asia. And here's daffodils growing very happily in the wild. So they're native to this part of the world. When people get involved, then we like to improve on nature in lots of instances. And here's a double flowered daffodil, which is actually bred by people. So we switch around the number of anthers, and we switch around the parts of the flowers, and we tend to make them bigger and more showy and things like that, just because we like this kind of thing. So really this is like a wildflower versus a cultivated flower. So there's different wildflowers in different parts of the world. So if you're in New York, you'll have wildflowers of New York. If you're in the Mediterranean, you will have wildflowers in the Mediterranean. And here at home, we have our own wildflowers of Ireland. And so every place has its own little unique suite of species of wildflower, which is quite nice. It makes the world interesting. And at the National Botanic Gardens, we like to grow the world's wildflowers. And we're laid out like a scientific book. So people mightn't often think that we look pretty, but that's just kind of by accident, because all of our plants, so if you find one rose, you'll find all the roses. If you find one cherry tree, you'll find all the cherry trees. So we like to grow over 15,000 different plant species here. So we like to grow everything. We grow the wildflowers, but also we grow the cultivated varieties like those double daffodils and things like that. And the big thing that I highlight here in red is that we stop them at the garden gate. We don't let them out into the wider environment. We keep them within our garden, and we keep them just for research and for show and for ornament, just as we keep our own back gardens for these things as well. So if we wanted to look at where the best place in Ireland to see Irish wildflowers are, well, the Burren in bloom at the moment was pretty stunning. And this is where 70% of the Irish wildflowers actually live. And some of them are stunning. So you can see the wonderful gentian, which is in flower at the moment. And apparently it's a great year for gentians, these lovely blue flowers, the lovely blue gentian, mountain avens, O'Kelly's orchids, the lovely Mullockmore. So that you can see this is a wonderful landscape. And this is where our wild flowers like to live. And this is where 70% of our Irish wildflowers grow. So a lot of people say, I want to grow some wildflowers to save the bees. And yes, the bees really need our help. Though a third of our bee species are threatened with extinction from Ireland. And I know Una and the All Ireland Pollinator Plan have been working hard really in trying to develop ways to save the bees. So this is our lovely bee. And the thing about bees is they have quite short tongues. And so you can see here a little diagram of their little short tongues. So what they actually like to feed on are plants that are open. So where you can see the center part of the flower and all places where bees can access the nectar and the pollen. And then the other thing is that bees kind of come out early in the year as well. And they also can hang around quite late in the year up to November. We tend to think we see the bees in summer, but they're definitely out early and out late. And so things like our dandelions are quite important, especially in early spring, because this is a nice flower resource when they all wake up, and it's a nice bit of food for them. And they're worth a lot to us, because it's not just about saving the bees, but it's also they have a huge pollinator service, so they're worth a lot of money to us. If we had to do the jobs the bees do, it will cost 220 million, so it's quite a lot of money. So there's loads of packets of wildflower seed out there, and when I wrote the blog, I started to look a little closer as to what was actually in these wildflower packets. And what I discovered really kind of shocked me, because in these wildflower packets were wildflowers from different parts of the world kind of mixed up together. I think a lot of people were assuming they were buying Irish wildflowers. So in one packet here, you can see cosmos from Mexico, borage from the Mediterranean, poppy from Europe. So that's just one packet. So they're like kind of a bit of a mishmash. And that's why I call them the fantasy, because they're really the meadow, field and wildflowers of where they're not of anywhere in the world. And they're all exotic species to Ireland. So, and I think a lot of people didn't really realize this. So as I said, most of the wildflower mixes on sale are not Irish species, or nor are they sourced in Ireland. So sometimes they might even be Irish species, but they're not actually sourced here. So that was the blog basically saying that these are not wildflowers, they're just really flower mixes, because a lot of the species in them mightn't even exist in the wild anymore. And this is one example of calendula, which is a beautiful flower. The bees like it, but it's basically it's not technically a wildflower. So and it's not Irish either. So I suppose really just to highlight that to people. So it doesn't matter really where the species are from, or whether just once the bees kind of like them. Well, as I said, most of the wildflower mixes on sale, they just flower in summer, and there's already lots of food around. There's already lots of plants in flower in summertime, and they're also just annual. So you would have to sow these exotic packets every single year for the bees, because they just flower in summer. So, and the other thing I've seen happening is that people were actually taking out places which already had lovely Irish wildflowers to put in these exotic packets, thinking they were actually doing a better job by putting in the exotic packets. So this is what I said as well. Don't take out places that already have these lovely Irish wildflowers to plant exotic wildflowers. So road verges, they already have lots of Irish wildflowers. So here on the left are our dandelions and daisies where we get on our lawn, and this lovely road verge up in Donegal, which is lovely wet meadow species. So wildflower meadows are really disappearing. So in the UK, they estimate 97% of them have actually gone. And there's no reason to think that this wouldn't be the same kind of for Ireland. And we actually have I think a nearly more shocking statistic from the National Parks and Wildlife Service. In their surveys, in a 6-year period, we lost a third of our grassland species. So we lost a third of our calcareous grasslands and lowland hay meadows. And these are our Irish wildflower meadows. And we've actually lost a third of them in 6 years, which I think is a really shocking statistic. So I would say to you, before you do anything, just check what wildflowers you already have. And as I said, you already have these guys, definitely, if you have an urban or suburban lawn. If you have longer, more rough areas, you definitely have some grasses and these lovely epilobiums. The bees love clovers. This is another one. There'll be clover about, and butterflies here. This is bedstraw. And I suppose what you notice here as well is that there's actually grasses there. So butterflies, the caterpillars need something else to feed on. They don't just feed on the flowers. So the caterpillars of the butterflies would need the vegetation there as well. So we also need grasses in our wildflower mix. So we need grasses for other pollinators. So as you can see, there's lots of great videos on pollinators.ie on how to actually develop a wildflower meadow with just what species you have in your own lawn or your own patch. And I would say to you, Irish wildflowers are really under severe threat. So cornflower is one of these kind of old species from cornfields, and it's almost extinct in Ireland. So the last records we have, very rare records. So this is from 2015. There's only one site in County Clare with 23 plants. And here's Irish cornflower here. Now you'll see lots of these exotic cornflowers for sale, and a lot of these can kind of escape from our gardens. So these could have the potential to become kind of pollutants, really. So getting out, and they can escape from our gardens. And I would say to you, they're lovely and they're okay to plant in the garden, but just make sure they don't escape, and that we have our own very, very lovely cornflowers that are extremely rare in Ireland. So overseas tourism, I say the reason to kind of keep these road verges and these wildflowers is that people come here with the natural and unspoilt environment. And I know those of us that live in Dublin can't wait to get to the west to just have that wonderful feeling of being in a natural and unspoilt environment. And it's the reason why lots of us travel to more wilder places. And we really need to support the places with Irish wildflowers, which in turn support our biodiversity. So as I said, there's huge demand from everyone for wildflower seed, but I would say to you, just have a look at what you have first and don't mow, let it grow. Just help let's have a look there. There's a need for us to conserve our rarest Irish wildflowers. As you can see, there's some of them down to their very small numbers. And we really need to support the places and the people whose farming practices and the wider landscape support our rarest wildflowers, rarest Irish wildflowers. And this is most especially in the Burren, where 70% of our Irish wildflowers live. So thank you for listening. And if you want more information, the All Ireland Pollinator Plan has lots of very useful videos. There's a useful book on gardening for biodiversity, how you would identify species from national parks and wildlife, identifying wildflowers and meadow species. And then from ourselves, the National Biodiversity Data Centre, you can definitely get a lot more information on species and lists. So thank you so much for listening. And yeah, I look forward to the rest of the talks. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Noeleen. That was amazing, and I think it's a real case of people are probably well intentioned, but perhaps don't always have the most up-to-date and accurate information available to them, and it really highlights how important it is to share this information. And if people have questions for Noeleen, as we mentioned, maybe just pop them into the Q&A and she'll have a look through and hopefully be able to answer some of those. But thank you so much, Noeleen. Really, really great start to the evening. And I think fitting that we would now pass over to Dr. Una Fitzpatrick, who I'm sure many of you are familiar with, but she's senior ecologist at the National Biodiversity Data Centre and has been responsible for the hugely successful All Ireland Pollinator Plan for the development and then overseeing delivery of this amazing plan that I think really is just almost the poster child now for how to do something well, and in terms of sharing information, and the impact it has had has just been amazing. And the great news is that there's a new plan being launched, or has recently been launched, building on the successes of the previous plan. So I'm going to hand over to Una to update you a little bit on that plan. So thank you very much, Una.
Thanks, Sonia, and thanks to Burren for inviting me. It's lovely to be back again, getting a chance to talk to you about the Pollinator Plan. So I'm just going to do a really quick overview of the plan and some of the successes of the first phase, and then I'm going to tell you a wee bit about what we're going to try to achieve in the second one. So, as you know, I work in the National Biodiversity Data Centre, and we track changes in Ireland's wildlife, and we've got amazing biodiversity in Ireland. You know, Noeleen talked about the wildflowers, but there's 31,500 species in total. Really just, you know, amazing biodiversity. But I think, you know, we all know at this stage that biodiversity loss is a huge problem. That's a complex topic and can feel a bit overwhelming, to be honest, to know what to do about it, certainly as individuals. So I think it's important that we try to identify these simple vehicles that can be used to sell that biodiversity message to a very wide audience. And thankfully, pollinators are perfect for this. So they're an element of biodiversity that people can understand and relate to. You know, you can communicate about them in a clean and simple way. You can easily monitor changes. And most important of all, I suppose, when you protect pollinators, that has knock-on benefits for protecting biodiversity generally. So I think, as we all know at this stage, unfortunately, the plight of pollinators, you know, is similar to what's happening with all of our biodiversity. So in Ireland, we've got the honeybee, which isn't in trouble, but then we have these 98 wild bee species, so 21 bumblebees and 77 solitary bees. And of those wild pollinators, 1/3 are threatened with extinction from the island of Ireland, unfortunately. What I think is even more worrying is that our common species, so things that we thought were okay, so things like common bumblebees, you know, we know from schemes within the data centre that they're in trouble too. So the bumblebee monitoring scheme tells us that the abundance of our really common bumblebees, that's been declining year on year since we started measuring this in 2012. So really the rare species are disappearing through the loss of semi-natural habitats, but those common species are in real trouble because of the way we're managing the rest of the landscape. So if there's a problem, what do you do? I think, you know, you have to decide if it's important, then critically assess it and how serious it is, identify the causes, collectively agree a positive framework to address it. And that's really what the All Ireland Pollinator Plan was. Then, you know, identify evidence-based actions to help communicate those, you know, work together where you can, and then track progress. Is what you're trying to do actually working? So, you know, you have to be really clear on what we're asking people to do. These are Ireland's 98 wild bee species. You can see, you know, gorgeous insects, amazing diversity there. And it's all very well to say, you know, there's a problem, we want you to help, unless you actually tell people what it is that you want them to do. And really, if you want to help with the pollinator plan, it's about thinking about how your site, whatever it is, whether it's a garden, a school, a park, a farm, you know, a council, roadside, whatever it happens to be, you know, can your site provide food, shelter, and safety for pollinators? And if you do that, it can help, that's helping to protect biodiversity generally. So, as I say, it's all very well asking people to help unless you explain what it is that they can do. So we've been producing these evidence-based guidelines for different sectors. So you might have seen these, there's lots of them available at this stage for farms and councils and businesses, gardens and so on. They're all evidence-based, the sector feeds in each time, and then we try to tailor the communication. You can get them all on the website at pollinators.ie. There's lots of other stuff. So there's a how-to series for some more complicated actions. And then there's, this third series where we're tackling how to make specific sites like sports clubs and so on more pollinator friendly. So all is on the website. Hopefully also, some videos and animations and things, that might be useful if people are interested. I just want to, while I've got this captive audience, I suppose, mention 2 key actions. And the problem with pollinators is really hunger. There's just not enough food for them in the landscape anymore. So they need a range of plants right throughout their life cycle, as Noeleen talked about, right from spring through into the autumn. And there's 2 actions that would make all the difference. One is in spring, and that's if we could have more flowering hedgerows. So, native hedgerows that get a chance to flower in spring. That's incredibly important. And, you can see at the minute, I think May's a beautiful time in Ireland because you've got these gorgeous hawthorn, whitethorn, flowering across the landscape. It looks stunning. The more of that, the better for our biodiversity and certainly the better for our pollinators. The other action is to not cut the grass so often. So we'll have more native meadows. And, the 2 together, because hedgerows flower in spring, and then those meadows are coming into flower in late spring, summer. And the 2 together provide an amazing resource of natural native flowers for pollinators in the Irish landscape. Just I'm a bit like a broken record, and I know that, but the whole don't mow, let it grow is so important. And it really is the cheapest and the most cost-effective way to help pollinators. And, Noeleen talked about it already. And I sometimes show this slide because there's 3 types of grass cutting going on in there. You've got cut regularly, cut less frequently, maybe, every, 3 or 4 weeks. And then there's cut once a year. If you're a bee, you can imagine yourself, you're not down with that, but you love a bit of these, and it's so easy to help just by reducing your mowing to allow the wildflowers that are naturally in the soil bank a chance to grow and provide food. Just to say, if you want these grassy areas to become more flower rich on their own, you have to take the cuttings away each time. So when you cut the grass, you have to remove it so that you're gradually reducing the soil fertility and giving those wildflowers in the soil a chance to compete with the grass and grow. So and it's nothing fancy. And again, Noeleen did a brilliant job of explaining this, but it really is nothing fancy. These are the things that pollinators want, and you can see all these bees, happily feeding on, dandelions and daisies and buttercups and clovers, cuckoo flower, so important for butterflies. These flowers will come up anywhere. You really just need to give them a chance, and it's such an important action, to bring that habitat that Noeleen talked about. We've lost our semi-natural grasslands, we need to do something about this. Incredibly important habitat in Ireland, incredibly important for our biodiversity, and incredibly important for our pollinators. And we can bring that back, even if it is tiny pockets at a time, on verges, on roundabouts, in our gardens, in our schools, and so on. And it's not the front of the wildflower seed packet, as Noeleen explained. It's this. These are gorgeous sites, brilliant for pollinators. And I think if COVID has taught us anything, spending time ourselves in places like this, it's good for our own physical and mental health, never mind anything else. So I can't see the top of that. I'm not sure what's going on there. Sorry. Oh yeah. So I was going to tell you some of the successes of the first phase of the All Ireland Pollinator Plan. So some of the things that we achieved in the first 5-year phase. I suppose the first thing was, that the 81 actions in the plan, were largely delivered. We've produced these evidence-based toolkits by sector. This just to the end of 2020, actually, we've had a whole set of new councils actually have signed up in the last couple of months. But at the end of 2020, we already had 55%. I think there's now 3/4 of all councils that are supporting the plan. There's 162 local communities that have become really pollinator friendly through the Tidy Towns competition. And we're going to hear, 2 examples of local communities that have done amazing things, after me when Cormac and Billy talk. We managed to reach, all primary schools in the Republic. The number of business supporters of the Pollinator Plan is continuing to increase. It's at about 320 at the minute, which is fantastic. Parks have become pollinator friendly through a pollinator award in the Green Flag for Parks. We've got lots and lots of sites logged on the mapping system that we have within the National Biodiversity Data Centre that tracks actions. We're seeing increased levels of volunteer recording, increased, awareness of the issues. We've got a farmland pollinator project that's running from 2019 to 2023 in the centre, which is showing how all farms, regardless of type or intensity, can become more pollinator friendly. There's a pollinator research network that was established in 2017 and has been grown, that's doing an awful lot of research to support the plan. And thankfully, we have been regarded as a success story internationally, and that's thanks to all the people who really have just supported the plan and bought into it and helped deliver it. Celebrate some of that, we published this booklet to mark the end of the first phase. To be honest, the hardest thing we did was pulling out stories because there were so many that we could have chosen. So we picked about 80 to go into this, of really good examples of things that had happened across all sectors to support pollinators, and Ennis and Monaghan certainly featured in this, and we'll hear more about them after me. So just a tiny wee bit about what the next plan's going to be like. So the next phase is 2021 to 25. We wanted this one to be more ambitious, but still, remain realistic. And we wanted to critically review the successes and failures and build on those for the next 5 years. So it's got 6 objectives this time. Sometimes think we lost the run of ourselves, but we went from 81 to 186 actions this time. So, it is more ambitious, and the partners have all bought into it again, which is fantastic. So it's launched at the end of March. We've also got a bit more funding this year. So Juanita, who I think spoke to you yesterday, she's been the Pollinator Plan Officer since 2017, does amazing work, and she's hugely responsible for the success of it. So her position is now funded by National Parks and Wildlife Service, and now we've got a Farmland Pollinator Officer. Ruth joined us in April, and she's funded by the Department of Agriculture, which is fantastic. So, as I say, the new plan has 6 objectives. We've got lots of actions to, help pollinators on farmland, on public land, on private land. Actions, to help honeybees and make sure that we balance honeybees and wild bees over the next phase. Actions this time on rare pollinators, and then, actions on strategic coordination of it. Don't worry. I'm not going to, Anya and Pranjali, I'm not going to talk about all the actions. I know you're thinking, hurry up now, we're on a quick time limit here. But I just want to give you sort of a flavour of some of the kind of things that we would hope to deliver next time around. And really, we just want to engage more, monitor more, and encourage more land to be managed for biodiversity, and I suppose that's the core of it. But we do also want to really try to reach new audiences, and one that we really want to try and reach next time are hospitals and healthcare sites. And I think there's huge scope there, to make those pollinator friendly. And obviously, that also has health and well-being benefits. So we want to develop, more new guidelines, do more training, provide more technical advice now that people, have bought into the plan and they need slightly different advice than perhaps when they were starting out. We want to do more to support rare pollinators, to say link to other initiatives better, particularly climate and health. We want to establish an All Ireland Pollinator Trio, which pulls out, really excellent examples of pollinator habitat that's been created and put those into an All Ireland Trio, just to celebrate that and also to use it for knowledge exchange. I want to hopefully recognise sites that have decided to go pesticide free, whether it's a park or a school or a hospital or a whole community. Hopefully, we want to try to do that. And we also want to try and raise awareness better with the public. And to do that, we've launched this little scheme, Pledge Your Garden for pollinators. So I'm going to just finish up now on this, because this is something that we can all do to help. So if you're interested, we've got these new resources for things you can do in your garden. So it's got actions and things that you can do each month, and you can go in and actually pledge your garden and say, yeah, I am committing to do this. And I think, there's over 800 people that have pledged their garden since we launched this recently. So again, if people are listening tonight and they'd be willing to engage and do that, would be fantastic. Once you've got your garden, there's lots you can do to help us monitor pollinators. You might want to take part in some of the schemes. Flower insect time counts is a really simple one where you just watch a patch of flowers for 10 minutes and count how many insects visit. But it provides us with really important data within the National Biodiversity Data Centre that helps us to track change. Also, we've got a garden butterfly monitoring scheme that you might be interested in. Just last, to finish up, tomorrow's World Bee Day. So there's been a huge amount of interest. And just to mention, I suppose, 2 things that are happening in Ireland. The Irish Examiner have been really supportive of the Pollinator Plan, and this year they have a free A5 booklet tomorrow with lots of our resources. So, they've got the garden one that I just showed you, the actions that you can do each month. They've got pollinator friendly plants and lots of our resources, and some of the, success stories from the first phase. So it'll be in the Examiner tomorrow as a free booklet if people are interested and want to pick it up. It's really hard to get hard copy resources at the minute because, we're not out at events and things. So this is a good way to get your hands on one if you're interested. Also, TG Cahir made a documentary on pollinator plans and how communities have been helping. and that's going out on TG Car tomorrow evening at 9:30. So again, just to finish up, you know, it's so true that the beauty of the pollinator plan is that it's not one person or one group or one sector that's being asked to solve this. You know, it's all of us. And if we all took small actions together, you really can begin to solve big problems. Just want to say a huge thank you to the Burren Bio Trust, who've been so supportive of the pollinator plan right from the very start. And, you know, we really appreciate it and all that you've done to support it. So thank you very much. And I'll stop when I think Cormac is going to talk to you next about the amazing work that Ennis have done. So I'll stop sharing and pass you over to Cormac.
Okay, evening everyone. I'll share my screen. Oh, bit soon. Okay, if everyone can see that. Yeah. Okay, so look, a huge thank you for the invite this evening to present to you about the work we're doing for pollinators in Ennis Tidy Towns. My contact details are there at the bottom of the screen. Look, we are more than happy to share any knowledge we've collected or speak to anyone, so make sure to jot down the name and the email. So I suppose, like I said, we're coming from Ennis. We live in a beautiful town. We're very proud of it. I suppose just to show this, it just shows the mixture of different habitats that are throughout the entire town. We've got the amazing River Fergus going through the town, but lots of green space, lots of urban woodland and trees, and something that we're very proud of, and that we enter the Tidy Towns competition annually. I suppose maybe just to start off, the Tidy Towns, just by its name, is a little bit of a misnomer, and I'm sure there's lots of people attending this evening that, look, tidiness is one element of it, but essentially the Tidy Towns competition is probably the biggest biodiversity, environmental and sustainable competition in the country at the moment. There was about 913 entrants in 2019, and I think it's testament that when there was no competition last year, all those groups still kept going and kept on contributing to their local communities. So I think that was brilliant. I suppose we couch a lot of our biodiversity work in Ennis in a biodiversity plan that we developed back in 2017 called Wild About Ennis. And a huge part of that was about raising awareness and doing community-centered projects on biodiversity and pollinators. We were very fortunate. So it was 2017. We started developing in 2016, but the pollinator plan had been developed at that stage. And I have to hand it to Una and Juanita. It's a fantastic resource. It's scientific. It shows management regimes that work, but it's communicated in a way that's very, very easy to understand. So I suppose what we've kind of become known for in Ennis is our pollinator roundabouts, which is something we've started now, but we're in our 4th or 5th year at this stage. And this is a collaboration with Clare County Council, where we worked with them very closely, and we said, look, we really want to try this pollinator management in public green spaces, and we've got some very large grassed roundabouts in Ennis. So we said, you know, can we tackle that? So there's our lovely Beach Park roundabout, and as you can see, lovely oxeye daisy, clover, lovely mix of species there. And what we found over time, that in year 2 and year 3, we were getting much more diversity at our roundabouts. So no more than the pollinator plan, we were very anxious to show to people that this was an effective means of management. So we worked very closely. We're very fortunate to have a local BSBI recorder, Donncha O'Cahan. So Donncha worked with us, and he monitored our roundabouts before and after the management. And what we've shown is that there is a 55% increase in species when you start following the pollinator plan management. In some areas within 1 year, we had orchids growing at the sites. And so that was absolutely wonderful. Again, though, I suppose the logistics of trying to cut the roundabouts was one thing that we had an awful lot of problems with. We used cut the grass, and then the grass would be left there. And then there's the issue of Tidy Towns volunteers going onto Main Road and onto roundabout to rake it up. And we had a couple of years where we were finding it very, very difficult. We then, in 2019, we ran a pilot with the Biodiversity Zero Grazer, which we'd seen at the ploughing championships. So this hadn't been used yet. Zero Grazer is a recognized technology for dairy farms, but this was the first time that it was used on a biodiversity level. So we had just won the Pollinator Special Award, which is brilliant. So we got €1,000, and we put that straight into renting the machine for a day to run a trial. So the trial was ran, and it was incredibly successful. Very interesting. At our roundabouts, we actually removed 9 tons of grass. So I suppose that's another logistical side that people will need to bear in mind when they're doing this type of management. Now, again, we have very good partners with Clare County Council. So all that material was taken to a council-owned composting facility. So it didn't go to landfill, it was reused. But it was really good. And like as a result of that, we wrote up a technical blog for the Pollinator Plan, and it was put on their website, again, in the interest of knowledge sharing. Happy to say that since that trial, we successfully leveraged Leader grant aid from Clare Local Development Company and a philanthropist who, unfortunately for us, wants to remain anonymous, but we've actually purchased the unit. So we're the first group on the island of Ireland to have purchased this Biodiversity Zero Grazer, €24,000. It's a partnership with Clare County Council, and we're making that freely accessible to any community group or publicly owned space in the county. And look, we are also open to discussing it with other local authorities if they want to trial it. But I think we've done the pilot, we've proven it works, and it's great to have purchased that unit. And then you never know who's going to turn up to look at the unit. So Nationwide were down last week, and they were doing a lovely piece on Hogs Prickle and Bev Truss, it's a hedgehog charity out in East Clare. And Bev said, you have to go into Ennis. They're doing great work in Ennis. So in came Blonnet and her film crew, and we brought out the Zero Grazer, and we showed them our roundabouts and the work that we're doing for pollinators. I think safe to say, Blonnet was blown away, and there was lots of cowslip selfies and everything going on. So it was really good for us. I'm not too sure when it's going to be aired, but it's great to be able to showcase that work to other communities. And Nationwide has such a large following that no better avenue. So as well as pollinators, we have a zero herbicide policy within Ennis Tidy Towns. Now, that's not to say that herbicide is not used within Ennis, but we are strongly advocating for the reduction and the ultimate ceasing of herbicide. We don't use it as part of any of our activities, but again, what we use some of our Tidy Towns award money to fund a trial for foam stream. So essentially, as you can see here, it's a way of managing weed. So hot water comes out with foam, and the foam is fully biodegradable, so there's no polluting side effects from that. And that heat encapsulates the weed, breaks it down, including the seed, and it's a very, very effective way of getting rid of it. So this is used in areas like, alongside curbing and on roads. So again, a very environmentally friendly approach. Now, I'm sure like all the other Tidy Towns people here listening in, there's also a significant amount of elbow grease, and our crew are out hoeing night, noon and morning. Again, leaving areas where there are less weed and more wildflower, but that interface between the road and the curb. We partnership a lot with other groups. One was Banner Beekeepers. So we actually help them. And again, Tidy Towns groups will recognize this, but there's a lot of engaging with the local authority and, trying to cajole and get things done. So we're kind of a dab handed at this stage. So we helped Banner Beekeepers to develop a community apiary it's an old remediated landfill within Ennis. So there was an existing hard standing area where the weigh station used to be. The site is now fully remediated, and they have established a community apiary there. So we got a lovely sign done up. Unfortunately, happened to be put beside the no shooting sign, but of course, you just make a joke of it and you say no shooting of bees in the area. Again, Banner Beekeepers do amazing work, not only with helping adults who are interested in beekeeping, but also with kids. So they've actually, with the help of a local county councillor, they've purchased lots of kids beekeeping outfits. So they get to expose them and raise awareness about pollinators and honeybees. Another thing we've been trying to do within the town is to migrate the formal planting around the town, the hanging baskets, the tier planters like you see here, from plants that aren't pollinator friendly to ones that are. So what you see here is a collaboration with the Limerick and Clare Education Training Board and their horticultural class. developed 100% pollinator planters for us. And this is an example of one here, which were then placed throughout the town with dedicated pollinator plan signage at the bottom. So this is just an example of it. Again, and I think what people found is it was far more even visually attractive than the standard ones that have been used. We've managed to double the number of planters to 4 this year. Tidy Towns fund that. Again, mostly perennials, and what you find then is you have an upfront investment of that, but then long term, it's much cheaper to maintain them. Partnership, we worked with the local Macron and Firma and our own Tidy Towns volunteers, and we planted an orchard. Again, apple trees, great source of food for pollinators, as are the likes of willow trees, which flower very early in the season. So we always bear that in mind as well when we're doing our planting and our planting plans. Again, example of more native trees here in our local park. And what you see there is in front there, little embossed panels. So it's just as another biodiversity project. It's a way of children to be able to do a leaf rub, even when there aren't leaves on the trees, and it stops them picking the leaves off as well. I suppose a big threat to native biodiversity is invasive species, and I think this very much linked here, particularly in sites where you might have a lovely wildflower verge that gets taken over with the likes of maybe Japanese knotweed, giant hogweed, winter heliotrope. So we ran a dedicated session in our local Tesco supermarket there, 2019. With Francis G. Quinto. So an amazing event. And I suppose it was good for people just to be able to identify those species and the impact it does have on biodiversity. We're very much in favour of knowledge sharing. So on the right, you'll see our pollinator planters that we developed with the Education Training Board. That's the full plant list there, and that was circulated widely on social media. And on the left-hand side, we accessed local Agenda 21 funding to develop a community biodiversity toolkit. And again, as all the previous speakers were saying, actions for pollinators are actually actions for biodiversity in general. So what we did was we identified 3 green spaces within the town. One was the town park, one was an estate green area, and one was a GAA pitch. And we took them as 3 case studies and showed how you can improve the area for biodiversity. We work with local estates and we develop green community action plans, and we give them €200 seed money. Again, a key one the whole time is if you have an area that you don't have to mow on a regular basis, don't mow, let it grow. In areas where you can, provide a type of, be it a creeper or trees to support pollinators, that's all part of our plan as well. We have a very successful Best Kept Garden and Green Area competition every year. Every single entrant has to show that they're doing work for biodiversity, but then we also have a dedicated biodiversity garden category. And this year's winner, well, last year's winner was Maureen Martell. And again, just a real lovely example of how letting areas grow wild within a larger garden and the benefits for pollinators and biodiversity. These are our estate winners. Again, what you don't see in this photograph is that they had actually let areas left unmown. So this is the main recreational space for kids and that in the estate. So that is kept regularly mown during the summer. Then just awareness raising initiatives. This was an old hoarding on the Tulla Road, which now has an estate built in it in the last 6 months. But we worked, it was a corporate day out, and we said, look, we'd love to do an art project. So we included things about swifts and starlings and swallows, but we also included a section on bees, and that's the center art piece there. Again, just ugly hoarding, just used to promote biodiversity. We even had pollinators in our St. Patrick's Day parade. That's my young lad, front and center, dressed up as the bee. Then actually there was the HSE Judic Centres for people, a centre for people with disabilities, did loads of paper flowers for us. And just a note for anyone who partakes in a parade, don't miss the first meeting. That's me as a ladybird in the background because I happened to miss the first meeting and got the dud costume. We impart a lot of knowledge as part of our junior volunteer program for local kids. It's a 3-day program. One is a dedicated section on local wildlife. And then as an add-on to that, we developed kids' activity sheets. So these were given out to all the cafes and pubs and restaurants in town. And essentially they're colouring in sheets. So they encompass the wide range of heritage and streetscape that we get in the town, but we also did a dedicated one on pollinators as well. And there's a pollinator word search, and there is some nice examples there of just things for kids to color in. Actually, sorry, I'm after noticing there, that's the one we did for my workplace. There was an actual one for Ennis Tidy Towns as well, in case you think I'm stealing other people's work. And I'll just finish on this. It's all about spreading the word. And I think that's a key thing with Tidy Towns. There is a competition, but there is a great sense of family and knowledge sharing. So we run a series of biodiversity lectures that we open up to the entire county every year. We lecture at the County Tidy Towns event, again, talking about pollinator work. We have a strong online presence, and we very much see that sharing information is a key thing. So definitely check out ennistidytowns.com and our social media channels. We share knowledge. We help other groups and they help us in return. So there's a great group, Wild About Milltown Malbay. We've been doing some mentoring work with Shannon Tidy Towns. And then, like I was saying, having the likes of Nationwide visit your town and have that showcase to the country is a great way for now that people will find out about the Zero Grazer. And whilst I said it's not all about the competition, we were absolutely over the moon to win the Large Urban Centre Pollinator Award in 2019. So that was all of us there after the awards. It's just it started to rain. But again, our volunteers are a great group of people, and things like the special awards and the Tidy Towns competition are so important to embed that sense of biodiversity and what community groups can do. So I think it's hugely important that the Tidy Towns is there, but also the likes of the National Biodiversity Data Centre and the Pollinator Award as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Cormac. That was brilliant. It was a whole lot of innovative ideas there. I wonder, how long has the Ennis Tidy Towns group been in existence? And do you have any challenges in the beginning getting the group together or keeping the motivation?
They're one of the longest running groups in the country. They're over 30 years. I do think the motivation is there. And again, what I would say to every Tidy Towns group, it does not happen overnight. You know, a lot of it is, it's a change, it's a shift in mindset that areas that might look untidy might irk certain people. I do think though, use the pollinator plan guidance. For example, our pollinator roundabouts, we had some detractors from them in the beginning. And what we did was we employed a cutting regime around the outside. So we actually cut about a meter around the outside regularly. So the management looks very purposeful, that people think there's something going on here. But on the flip side, you're never going to please everyone. So we got about 3 complaints on social media, and we got several hundred people going, we love your roundabouts. So it's all about, you know, just because someone doesn't like it doesn't mean they're right. So stick with it, use the science, use the pollinator guidelines, because that's something we always rely back on. We can go, we're doing this because of this. This is recognized guidance. This is national guidance. This is award-winning guidance. And then 9 times out of 10, once people have the information, they're happy. They're happy to change their mind about it.
And in terms of communicating your ideas, what do you think was your single biggest effective tool in terms of spreading the word? I know you employed lots of methods.
Social media. It's a lot of hard work. And when you're a purely voluntary group like a Tidy Towns, sometimes it can slip back, but definitely very, I think, positive messaging, nice photographs, opening yourself up to, you know, take criticism or, you know, invite people's comment on it. But really, it is social media, Facebook and Twitter. Actually, Twitter seems to be a big place for Tidy Towns as opposed to Facebook, which I found very interesting. But for groups that can't develop a website, just go with social media. It's the best way to go.
Very good. Well, thank you, Cormac. That was really inspiring. And I'm sure loads of people have benefited from your talk today, and you might even get loads of queries and inquiries for advice. Maybe you'd like to put your contact details in the chat section, like you mentioned. We also noticed there's a few questions in the chat section. So just a request to our attendees that if you'd like these questions to be answered by our speakers, maybe try and put them into the Q&A sections. It might be a bit easier to manage and answer. And thank you again to all the panelists for continuing to answer these questions. I would like to now hand you over to Billy Flynn from the Monaghan Dispersed Orchard Project. Sorry, also thank you, Una. I forgot to say thank you to you. I know that was brilliant, and we're looking forward to the examiner tomorrow. and the Plan B documentary on TG Cahir. And thanks again, Cormac. Billy, we're ready for you whenever you are. I know you would like me to share your presentation.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes, please, Pranjali, if you can. Okay. That would be fantastic. Thank you.
Okay, you can tell me what to do.
Great, thank you. I'm coming to you from not where I expected. Work ran on a little bit later than, and it was slightly different than I thought. But that's my line of work, so I can't complain. I'm an ecologist, and I'm from Clones in County Monaghan, and this presentation is about Monaghan Town. And just a little background, Monaghan Town is the principal town of County Monaghan, and it's it's our largest urban centre, and it's like many of the county's towns, it has the rural hinterlands right there. There's very few parts of Monaghan Town where you can't see the countryside from, or some aspect of the countryside, be it a tree line or one of our many little hills from the town. But we developed this particular project with really, we didn't have the pollinator prize in mind, but more on that later. This arose from a chat after a walkabout with Emer Brennan, who's the then chair of Monaghan Town Tidy Towns. Monaghan Town has a very active Tidy Towns group, and although I'm from a different town in Monaghan, I really liked their ethos from the word go, and I suppose I adopted them in a way, and because they were always keen to explore new things, especially when it came to biodiversity. So next wee slide there, Pranjali, please. One thing I really like about Monaghan Tidy Towns is that they have no lack of ambition. And I'm sure you've seen around the country, you've seen you're arriving into town and it announces that it's a fair trade town. And Monaghan, they decided, we're going to be a biodiversity town. This is how we are going to present ourselves to people. And that site there, and I know it's not the prettiest, and Cormac showed us a remediated tip site, and here, this is a bit of rescued local authority land, and this is where the allotments are. And the allotments played a key role in the Dispersed Urban Orchard project, as did lots of unusual places within the town. And the Monaghan Tidy Towns group, they've worked with a number of other community groups, including the allotments group, which I suppose they evolved separately, but many of their aims are in common. They were all traveling in the same direction, so they joined forces to develop that site there. And with the next slide there, Pranjali, please. There you see the allotment group there, with the great Éanna Ní coming to give her advice on the management of the allotment site and some of the biodiversity efforts that were taking place there. Thanks, Pranjali. Next one. This now will resonate with lots of the comments from your first two speakers, from Noeleen and from Una. And you see this sign. I mean, these signs are an absolute gift, because they take away the first glance of neglect, and they put the word managed in, which is fantastic, because this gives Tidy Towns groups a chance to let things grow. Don't mow, let it grow, and to allow, those are all native wildflowers that you're seeing there. And it basically it gives you license not to manage, not to cut, not to spray. Now the next slide shows just a schematic of Monaghan Town, and like all towns, this is a centre where people live, and necessarily there's an awful lot of hard space within the town, and this is roads, curbs, buildings, but also the barriers that are between those, walls, fences, all these people constructed things. And what we were hoping to tackle was the connections that run from our rural hinterlands, which aren't very far away. And you can see there's a lake down there in the bottom left, and you can see arising from that, there's another little water course there. That's the part of the disused Ulster Canal. Peter's Lake is right in the centre of the town, and up towards the top of the town, we have a number of other sites that are effectively wild, because these are no longer managed for their original purposes, be they other old orchards, a large hospital grounds, and also public authority land that's no longer managed for food production or for anything else. And these places we saw as opportunities. So next slide, please, Pratali. Thank you. This is one of the most fantastic assets that the town has. This is Rossmore Forest Park, which is a former grand estate. It was taken oh gosh, nearly 100 years ago now, and a lot of it was given over to Quilcha and given to coniferous plantation, but an awful lot of broadleaf trees, and an absolute gem for wild species. And we have the great spotted woodpecker there. We have I've recorded peregrine falcon there, and buzzards, red squirrel, etc., etc. But it's a little ways outside the town, but it does have a connection, which brings it towards the Ulster Canal. And next wee slide there, Pranjali. Thank you. And here, this was a key asset in our biodiversity effort. This is a piece of linear habitat. This is part of the disused Ulster Canal. We hope one day this will be a greenway that'll connect it to my hometown of Clones. But you can see that double tree line there that has allowed it to become wonderfully naturalized. And this is a green corridor, a biodiversity highway. And this reaches into the town of Monaghan. And next slide there should be a wee river. And this river here, whilst it's underground for a portion of its course within Monaghan town, this is another green corridor. This is another little artery going into the town. Cormac showed you the River Fergus going through the town, and absolutely beautiful watercourse and a biodiversity corridor. This is a less I suppose a less dramatic one, but nonetheless, this is important for aquatic species, but also for birds and for pollinators, because it is lined for much of its course with those willows that were mentioned by Cormac earlier on. So one of the first things we did, we looked to see what did we have in terms of our biodiversity assets, if you like, and circled in red there were the places that, now I just point out that these are produced for the purposes of a quick demo rather than exhaustively examining each site. So just bear with me. But these are for examples. Down the bottom left, you have a piece of woodland that's owned by a religious order, and as is the lake, and you can see a cronog, in fact, in that one there. Northeast of that is a section of the Ulster Canal. To the north of it is a substantial double tree line, and then there's Peter's Lake up towards the north of the site, and etc. These are our green areas, and these are our habitat highlights. And what Emer and I were wondering was, how could we possibly join these up so that wild species can make their way from one end of the town to the other and provide some sort of linkages? So on the next slide, we looked at where our good corridors are. Where do these corridors already exist? So this is where the footwork came in. Monaghan County Council provided us the high quality aerial photography, but there's still no getting away from it. You do have to put in the legwork, and you do have to get out there and see. And we found between both public and private sites, and even arteries like watercourses and the canal, there were some good linkages there already. But you can see where the reds and the greens don't join up. That is where we had blockages. So we looked at where the blockages were, and these were, naturally enough, these were buildings, and a lot of these in private ownership, and a lot of these were people's homes. So we had an idea. Next slide there, please, Pranjali. These are the areas here where these were kind of like where our blockages were. How could we fit something into this to complete this little jigsaw? So we thought, well, almost everybody has a garden, so why don't we get them to plant something that's going to be good for pollinators? And now we did not think giving them wildflower seed packets, just in case your first two speakers are still listening. That never crossed our minds up in Monaghan, I promise you. So we thought a bit more long term, and everybody likes trees, just about. Everybody likes apple trees, everybody likes fruit trees, and we have a strong tradition of growing fruit trees up in this county. And our next door neighbour in Armagh is probably the most famous for it in the country. So we thought, how about we offer people a discounted fruit tree? So we did a deal with the seed savers, and we also spoke to the county council, and we looked at our bank account, and we decided that we could offer everybody who wants to take part in this I think it's a half standard native Irish apple tree. I think we had a little bit of choice in what fruit. They weren't all apple trees, mostly apple trees, for €5. So the day came, and just that's near that center of that, you'll see some roofs there. That's Monaghan Shopping Centre. So we set up a little stall. And if you wouldn't mind, the next slide, please, Pranjali. So what we thought was, if we could get people to purchase these trees from us, we would only attach one condition, that they would have to give us their exact address and where they were going to plant it, front or back garden. They weren't allowed buy one and give it to their friend in Clonus or Clontibret or something like that. This was for Monaghan residents, and we apologize if we were a little bit selective, but this was a local project. So for example, if somebody up on Pound Hill, number 1 Pound Hill, purchased an apple tree from us and was to plant it in their back garden, that green dot would show us that we are going to have a maturing apple tree there from that day. So the big day came. Next slide, if you don't mind. Anybody who's hoping for a picture of a shopping centre like Cormac showed us is in for a big letdown. But just to assure you, we have a Tesco too. We set up, the county council were good enough to lend us their horticulturist, Dennis Heffernan, who's central to this project. We've lost him to Fingal County Council now, and it's our loss and their gain. If you're listening, Dennis, thank you so much. So Dennis took the county council pickup with permission and the trailer down to Seed Savers and came back with a big, huge load of apple trees that looked enormous to us when they arrived. And we did start off that Saturday. It was an appointed Saturday, and we used social media to advertise it. And we were sitting there and we were looking at each other going, is this going to work? Is anybody actually going to show up? And what are we going to do with these apple trees if they don't? About 20 were gone. And we had to actually send the long-suffering Dennis back down to Seed Savers and to get another load. So with the next slide there, Pranjali, please. And it's not very often you can say it worked. People happily handed over all their residential details and undertook to plant the trees, and it created literally a buzz about the town. That still left us with a few orange circles, and almost all of these had areas within them that were in the control of the municipal district of the county council, and Dennis was more than happy to start twisting arms and starting to get people to lobby their county councillors to actually put in native plants, and not just apple trees this time, because not all of them were suitable for trees, but to put in species that were good for pollinators, some early, some late, and so this was the project. We're kind of proud of the name, because we thought it up, and it was going to be an orchard, but it wasn't going to be in one place. It was going to be dispersed, and it was going to be an urban orchard. And we looked at each other and said, dispersed urban orchard, the duo project, that'll catch on. And it did. So thanks to Emer for her faith in that, and to Dennis and all of the Monaghan Tidy Towns volunteers. Next little slide there, please, Pranjali. So this was when the area started joining up, and now have we achieved 100% connectivity? No, not yet. But since then, things have actually changed, and I'm not just plumossing on Burren Bio or the people from the National Biodiversity Data Centre, but the All Ireland Pollinator Plan was key to this, because it has now entered the lingua franca, and you are now no longer looked at as if you've got two heads. People know what you're talking about. People acknowledge the importance of this, and people are reading this. Today, I was working on a motorway, far away from County Monaghan, and that motorway is a member of the All Ireland Pollinator Plan. It's just amazing stuff, and this has changed things, and it has given people a feeling of taking action back into their own hands, and this was an example of it. Next slide there, Pranjali. We're near the end, I promise. This was just from the other day. Well, a little while ago, interspersed amongst the daffodils there, you'll see crocuses, you'll see hyacinths, and this is one of the areas where we've closed the gap, and you see all the hard space around it. There we have another pollinator corridor, and I can tell you that this would have been unthinkable 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago. Just people would have just no, we're not doing that. No, it's grass and it's fine. We're just going to cut the grass, right? But now you are talking language that people understand. And Emer and I made a presentation to Monaghan County Council after they won the award, the Get Buzzing Award. And a little while later, Monaghan County Council became one of the first to ban the use of glyphosate in the municipal areas. Now, as Cormac said, it's never completely friction-free. There was, and there is, and there will be some pushback against this kind of thing. But now we have a horticulturalist in the county who has a budget and has the willingness, and he also has the persuasive skills to try out the cleaning, the weeding methodology that Cormac so graphically displayed there, and that is now being used in the county where glyphosate was. Now, yes, and as Cormac said, there is still elbow grease to be applied and all the rest of it, but we no longer feel like we're pushing a closed door. We feel like that elbow grease has loosened the hinges a little bit, and the pollinator plan has really shown the way and continues to do it. And the fact that Monaghan Tidy Towns was highlighted in that is no small help to us. We will use this. Yeah, that's not going to sit on the shelf now. That'll be pushed in the face of our local representatives, our municipal district engineers, and of course, it's inspiration to our residents. And winning succeed. Winning brings more success. And when you see that you're scoring well and that you're getting an award, that brings more people on board. And we're going to need, and like your contributor from the data center said, we are going to need people, and it's happening, and we're very pleased with it. And I think there might just be one more slide, Pranjali, and I'll never ask you to do this again. I promise. That's it. That's so on behalf of Monaghan Tidy Towns and myself, thank you so much for asking us along. And I wish I could see the Burren at this time of year, but but I'll bet you all wish you could see Monaghan too. So we're quits. Thanks very much, everybody. Night.
Thanks a million, Billy. That's just fascinating. I mean, it seems like in some way such a simple idea, this idea of the dispersed orchard, but equally it takes a lot to get to these simple ideas and to make them happen. And I thought as well, I was going to set homework for everybody to pledge your garden, in kind of as Una had mentioned, but this is a whole other level of pledging your garden, and amazing to see the buy-in. I was wondering, you know, did you have to do much work convincing people to get involved, or you said that the trees flew out? Like, how did you get that buy-in, I suppose, from the people to give over that space and get involved?
That was the easiest part, Anya. We put up, we did the social media thing. Well, I would say we, Monaghan Towns did it, and they put up a few posters, and it was in the shopping centre on Saturday morning, 10 o'clock. And then we had to put up more posters saying, trees all gone, sorry, we're back here next week, 10 o'clock, really hoping that Seed Savers actually had that many trees still in stock. But lucky for us and for everybody, they did. So that was actually the easy bit.
It's brilliant. It obviously just captured the imagination, and I think, you know, sometimes that's what it takes, is to find that little that gem that does that, and amazing to see. And I think, you know, all of our speakers this evening have really highlighted again this idea of community stewardship and communities taking actions that are relevant in their setting and that make sense for them, and kind of it's much more meaningful, obviously, then when it's kind of has come from the community and they're then able to do something. So it's really, really inspiring to see. And the comments that have been coming in, I think our audience would agree. They've really, I think people have gotten an awful lot from the presentation. So we thank you all so much. And thank you also for answering the questions, because they were coming in there thick and fast there for a while, and we were getting through them, which was brilliant to do. I also probably should apologize. Pranjali and I are very tight timekeepers, and we possibly tried to squeeze too much in, and for that I think on occasion people felt maybe like we rushed, and apologies if that was the case. But it will be the talk will be available on our YouTube channel soon, hopefully, whenever we get a chance, and so people could have a look back at it. And I think other than that, obviously I want to thank again our speakers, to again call people to pledge your gardens. I think it's again one simple action, and makes a lot of sense to me. And the other thing then to mention, I think Pranjali might share the details for the tomorrow night's events, because we continue on with Burren and Bloom, and we're off to a great start, but there's more still to get involved in, and we've another great 2 speakers tomorrow evening, and we'd love you to join us, and we'll pop the link into the chat box as well. And also just to mention, very importantly, we really, really appreciate the support of the Heritage Council and the EPA, who have given us some funding that make this event possible.